Great. We have Owen with us from Bitroots. Thank you for joining Drilling into Crypto, Owen. How are you today?
Yes, very good, Mo. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'd like to start off, as every episode, to ask you about yourself,
Mhm.
mainly about your journey, your what you were doing before Bitroots and before finding Bitcoin, and how you ventured into the space.
Yeah, I love this question because I think everyone has their own journey into Bitcoin, and it's all unique and uses from a very wide variety of industries. In my case, it was from academia, so specifically mathematics. So I studied a PhD in mathematics, and I wanted to be a professor, with like the tweed jacket and leather arm patches, but that future wasn't looking so great when you look at the hours you have to work and the conditions you have to work in. So I was looking to switch to something different, and I had a friend who was working for a Bitcoin R&D company, and he said, "Oh, I think you might be well placed to come and join us here." And that was 2018, and I didn't know anything about Bitcoin at the time. I mean, I'd heard of it. I was curious about it. At that time, it had both a positive and quite a negative reputation, but I thought, why not give it a go? And some of the geometry I'd studied is actually relevant to Bitcoin, and this was actually a surprise to me. I didn't realize that, but the cryptography in Bitcoin in the signature scheme is based on something called elliptic curves. And these are a geometrical construction that I studied well on the pure mathematics side. So that was my kind of technical link to Bitcoin and cryptography. And I spent 7 years leading an R&D team there, doing research in how to scale the technology, how to use it in a way that's both user-friendly and private. A lot of cryptography, so I published a lot of papers in cryptography. But around a year ago, I was looking to buy some Bitcoin, and I know the industry very well, and I knew that a lot of miners were now using renewable energy. Primarily because it's just the cheapest form of energy, and it's intermittent, and Bitcoin mining couples very well with that because you can turn it off and on very quickly. You can co-locate to the mining source and so on. So I wanted to buy some sustainably mined Bitcoin directly from these miners, but it just wasn't possible. It wasn't, although I knew who the miners were, they were just selling their coins on exchanges, and the coins weren't in any way linked to them after they were sold. So I thought this isn't right. I would really be very. I want these coins directly from them. I'd be very proud to own them, knowing that my purchase had gone to help renewable infrastructure, financing, and other forms of sustainable development. So that's why I founded Bitroots, which is to really, our mission is to transform Bitcoin mining into an ESG tool. I mean, many miners are doing this already, but it's allowing additional revenue streams for them by matching them with the people who want these coins. So you might be a family office who has certain ESG principles. You might be a fund or a treasury who wants to make sure your assets are sustainable. Or you might be a DeFi platform. You might want to do lending and staking using Bitcoin, and you want to have that powered by something that is sustainable. So what we do is match those buyers with the miners who are using sustainable energy so that you know your coin has come from one of these sources. And what we do at Bitroots, we provide the assurance of that. So we have a certification scheme that tells you, yes, this coin was mined by this miner using this energy. And you can really think of this as the world's first provenance platform for Bitcoin. So we can tell you where your Bitcoin comes from.
That's beautiful. So definitely a, a concept that's been around for some time, but I haven't seen anyone actually adopt it in a formal certification fashion on the blockchain that is
Mhm.
immutable, transparent, and that follows through with the mined Bitcoin from its stage of minting up until the and throughout the process of it going onto the market. Now, after it
Yeah.
goes onto the market and that coin starts trading, uh, does that certificate continue to follow that coin on the ledger?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Mo. So I call that the secondary market. So the
Yeah.
primary market is the miners selling their coins directly to the first buyer. And this does happen in an ad hoc way. Like I do know some large buyers who are getting these sustainably mined coins, but the problem comes when they want to sell them onwards. They have no proof that they went to all these lengths to get these sustainable coins. That's where our certification tracking software really comes into play. So that when if you purchase one of these coins and you want to sell it on in the future, you have that continuous record of provenance from a sustainable miner. So you can think of what we're trying to do is make this a mature secondary market.
Eh, and that's interesting because then you can find an alternative to voluntary carbon credits,
Yes. So
right? I mean,
this,
because
yeah,
my limited understanding on carbon credit markets, but I know there are two markets, right?
yeah,
The official one, which is trillions of dollars in volume, and then or maybe close to a trillion, and then the other one, which is a few billion dollars in
right.
volume, right? So that the $2 or $3 billion voluntary carbon credit market is what they call it, I believe. I think that is a niche that or that is a market that this solution could tap into and provide more credibility, more returns uh, from a financial perspective, and real world ESG use cases that actually adopt real technology, physical infrastructure for compute that
Mhm,
ultimately not just benefits the energy asset itself, but uh, the community around it, right?
mhm. Yeah, that's the social part of ESG. Yeah.
Because that monetary aspect or that financial aspect of the mining operation could then be invested back into these communities uh, with and if it were to be sold, then you might be able to get a premium on it. So all these things linger in my mind when you're explaining the
Mhm,
solution. If you can touch
mhm.
on some of these things that I mentioned, that would be really interesting for us to understand.
I can give you a very concrete example about how this is providing a social benefit. But first, I'll just mention carbon credits. So I love carbon credits, especially the voluntary ones, because I see this as, a lot of people, a lot of organizations trying really hard to make sure that they are carbon neutral by purchasing these credits. But what we can do is actually go one step further and say, okay, instead of purchasing an asset and then buying a carbon credit to offset the impact of that, we can give you assets that didn't cause any emissions to begin with. So we can say to you, these Bitcoins did not cause any emissions in the process because it's worth always remembering Bitcoin mining is a completely clean technology.
Yeah,
So the mining operations themselves, they're just data centers. They take electricity, and the only output you get is Bitcoins and heat. That's it. There's absolutely zero pollution involved in that. And then if your energy source is sustainable, is renewable, then that whole process is emission free. So what we can say to people is, here are some Bitcoins that didn't cause any emissions to begin with, so no need to purchase carbon credits. So that's quite a compelling value proposition if you want to help directly incentivize emission reduction.
before you move on that, because that reminds me of, you know, I do work on the financial advisory side for energy to compute projects, and we do
Mhm,
some work on the renewable side as well. Some of the discussions that came up from external funders uh, were who's going to offtake this energy, right? And our business revolves around energy to compute, so trying to
mhm,
monetize renewable energy sources or subsidized power or idle and wasted energy. Um,
mhm,
and when you bring up the point that Bitcoin miners will be the off-takers of first and last resort um, for the purpose of early monetization of the asset until there's a grid tie and
mhm.
industrial or commercial use case, but they start to ask questions like, but this doesn't benefit the country of origin, right? Or the community where this project is being built. But I think what you just mentioned about, the ESG angle is a good rebuttal. How would you answer such a question?
Oh, I'll answer that with a very concrete example in that's operational right now in Ethiopia. So you may be aware of the Grand Renaissance Dam. It's the largest hydro dam in Africa. It's only just been finished, went operational last year. And in Ethiopia, they have a grid that's fragmented. So not every community, particularly the rural communities, can get access to the electricity generated by this dam, which has twice as much as the country will ever need. So what they did is they were quite progressive. They invited the Bitcoin mining community to come along and to purchase this energy, to the offtake this energy that would otherwise be wasted. And in 2025, the Ethiopia Electric Authority generated over $200 million by selling their completely excess electricity to Bitcoin miners. And they use this directly to install power lines to connect these rural communities, which ultimately lifted people out of fuel poverty. So this is where, when I heard about this, I was just blown away, and I thought I have to get involved. So I personally invested in a mining operation in Ethiopia, and I'm really proud of the story behind these coins. So when I mine my coins, I'm not only happy because they're 100% sustainable from a hydro dam, but they are also helping lift people out of fuel poverty. And I just think that's such a great story that I'm really proud of. And I want other people to be able to get access to these type of coins if they want to invest in Bitcoin, but choose to do so in something that has a ESG impact. That's what I want to enable, and that's ultimately what I'm trying to achieve at Bitroots.
That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
so that's yeah, very concrete.
Yeah,
Mm,
I love it, and it's just exactly where this is going. And when I mean this, I mean the Bitcoin mining industry, the energy to compute transition,
mhm.
uh,
Yeah.
is it comes with a purpose, and I believe there are at least I'd like to believe that there are still quite a few of us that are mission driven and purpose driven, and still want to do this for the betterment of society. Uh,
Mhm.
but living in a globalized capitalistic world, or a globalized world that does adopt, the essence of capitalism, which could be a good thing if put to good use. Um, there's
Mhm.
still that angle of, um, uh, you know, above average. Don't usually like to use that word when speaking about investments, but above average returns, or
Yeah.
never, sometimes never before seen returns, depending on what the network effects are at the time and how the market is
Mm.
performing. So, it does capture the entire ESG essence, and there is that alternative investment asset class that's still widely untapped by, institutions and investors.
Mm.
Um, so, yeah, really interesting stuff. This Bitcoin, if certified in that fashion, could have a premium at some point in time, once this market is adopted.
Yes, it does have a premium. So it's similar to this concept already exists in many markets. For example, the gold market and diamond market. So nowadays, with diamonds, you can't buy a diamond anymore at a retail outlet that doesn't come with a certificate assuring you that this diamond was mined ethically. And there are a scheme called I think it's called Sustainable Mined Diamonds. And in the gold industry, another scheme exists. It's called Fair Mined Gold. So if you are a gold mine and you have very good ethical and environmental standards, then you invite Fair Mine to come along and inspect your facility, and they will give you a certificate, and your gold trades at a premium. That's at around 2 to 4% premium. Now, I suspect we'll see something similar, possibly a bit more for Bitcoin at the moment. And in the future, we just don't know what that will be priced at. I happen to think it might be priced at a much higher premium because we have the assurance of where this has come from. And when I talk to people, particularly, for example, I was at a very nice conference in London last week called Crypto for Good, and I explained this to them, citing the example in Ethiopia. people just haven't heard this, and when they do, their eyes light up. This is fantastic. This is yes, I want these bitcoins. I now no longer just want to buy them off an exchange.
Being in the
I would love.
industry makes you think that it's such an obvious thing to know, but
Yeah,
when you
no,
realize
it
that there's
isn't. Yeah.
still so many people that don't know about it, that's when
Yep.
the light bulb comes out. Okay, well, there's still a lot of work to do. There's still a market there. Don't lose hope. But because you're in the industry, sometimes you feel like it's so obvious. Everyone knows it. So it seems like no
Yep.
one's interested. But actually, a lot of
Yep.
people would be interested. You just got to get in front of them. And yeah, I believe that premium will eventually catch on because
Mhm.
just from my perspective, it would make more sense to buy a certified or ESG certified Bitcoin versus just a standalone carbon credit.
Mhm. Yeah, and it might you might look at it in terms of risk if you're in an industry that has strong regulations on this type of thing. It's just a less risky asset. It also from the perspective of risk from previous coin holders. So, for example, there are certain funds. Well, actually, I think a lot of them, a lot of the like the ETFs, they have a policy of transparently disclosing their assets. Usually, you have to be at a high enough level of investment to get that information. And whenever they purchase a Bitcoin, they screen it, they check it a certain amount of hops of previous owners, because if that was ever associated with the proceeds of crime, then that Bitcoin will there's a risk to them that they would have to that could be confiscated. There's not just Bitcoin, of course. This happens in the art world. It happened with a Picasso painting at Christie's last year. That was a really interesting one where the person who purchased it sued Christie's because they said you could have told us more information about the previous owner of this painting, and we could have avoided doing something untoward there. So it's not just Bitcoin that this affects; it's every asset. And if you get it directly from the source, from the miners, there's just less risk because there's less history involved. So not only that's the kind of governance aspect of it. So these coins are particularly valuable to people who are trying to sell exposure to them, like funds, like lending and staking platforms. Yeah,
Yeah, but I see a wider adoption even on a regulatory compliance level for
yeah,
environmental regulators and environmental authorities, right? For example, in Alberta, we have the carbon tax, right?
hmm
To a certain extent, based on certain emissions thresholds for power plants and energy producers. And you can offset your carbon tax with carbon credits, buy them off the market. And you know, some of these energy producers that have excess energy or enough energy to mine their own Bitcoin, whether it's capturing flare gas and instead of flaring, then you're generating power mining Bitcoin and having a certified ESG certified Bitcoin on your books. If only we were in a position, or maybe there must be some work you and I will need to do to convince the federal and or provincial governments and the regulatory authorities to accept ESG certified Bitcoin just
hmm
as they would carbon credits for the purpose of offsetting carbon tax, right?
absolutely. Yeah,
I
yeah,
think there's
absolutely.
a much wider adoption for this that is and as mature we might think it is, it's still very early.
Well, so I love the use case of flare gas because this is where Bitcoin mining is not only carbon neutral, it's carbon negative. So this is preventing uh, wasted methane being released into the atmosphere by instead turning that into energy to mine Bitcoin, which reduces the amount that is released. So, not only is it carbon, are those coins carbon neutral, they're carbon negative. You've just given me a kind of a great idea there. You could think of them as a carbon credit. If you own these Bitcoin, you have offset this amount
Yes,
of carbon. So
exactly.
there you go.
That is a problem that exists today in certain countries and provinces and states.
Mm.
Um, and it's a burden on investors, or actually, it's not it's a burden on the operators, and also it, it turns away investors, like foreign direct investments, because of
Mm.
carbon tax could really kill a project's economics. So, these are things that I think, Bitcoin could optimize assets, could optimize treasury. Uh, it, it just transforms your energy asset if it were stranded or wasted into a valuable um, cash flow producing asset, which just goes a long way. So this is really amazing. Um, yeah, I want to learn more about this and apply real world use cases to it. But tell me more about how did that um, certification of Bitcoin come to mind? When was that eureka moment for you? When was that aha moment that allowed you to
Yeah,
start?
this was, I was thinking about, as I say, purchasing these coins directly from a miner. And then I thought to myself, well, when I come to sell these coins, I want a record, a certificate of uh, where I got them from and the power that was used.
But why
And
did you think about wanting that record? Is it because of your own values or something sparked that thought that my Bitcoin should be clean?
it was my own values. So I thought if everything being equal, I would prefer a Bitcoin that I knew had come from renewable energy. Then I thought, well, I would also like to show that to people. I want to be proud of it. I want to show it off. How can I do that? Other than how do I let people into the research that I've done into acquiring this coin? And you can capture that in a document, which essentially is a certificate. And because I'd done a lot of R&D about the protocol transactions, how they're linked together, I knew how that tracking element would work. So it, you've got to be careful if I have, like, let's say a certified coin, not to mix that with an uncertified coin, because we know that Bitcoin is fungible on a technical level. These still are. So we wouldn't write any data to the chain. Bitcoin is still a Bitcoin on the ledger. So you could mix these up. So you have to be careful not to do that if you want to easily track it. But I knew more sophisticated methods to track the provenance of your Bitcoin. So there's a protocol called ordinals, and some people know this through an NFT craze called ordinal inscriptions. I don't have any comment on that, but ordinals as a concept is simply a way to identify every Satoshi when it was minted onto the ledger and to track it throughout its lifetime as it's traded on the ledger. And that was a missing piece of the puzzle. It meant that, well, okay, once I can identify the coins when they were first minted, once I can associate them with this particular sustainable mining operation, I then also have a method to track them throughout their whole lifetime as they're traded on the ledger. And you put those things together and you get a very strong process of a method for establishing the provenance of every single Satoshi.
But these
And so that
ordinals
got me really
are
excited.
attached to the coin that's mined, right? They're NFTs.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not attaching any NFTs because I'm not using ordinal inscriptions, which is an NFT protocol.
Mhm.
Ordinal theory is simply a method to order every Satoshi. That's why they're called ordinals.
Interesting.
So I'm using that methodology to track Satoshis. Nothing to do with NFTs. So it's
So,
kind of using the same underlying theory.
see. So on
Mhm.
the ledger, what does it show for these certified coins?
On the ledger, you will not see anything. You'll just see normal Bitcoins being traded. So ordinal theory doesn't require you to write any data to the chain. That's why it's such a
How
cool
can
and useful
how can
protocol.
someone identify that this is a certified Bitcoin?
Oh, by additional data. So let's say I was to say to you, this UTXO is a certified coin. I will also give you the certificate that says so. And if you trade that with someone else, then everything is linked together because every transaction is linked to the previous transaction. So you can just go back until you find the certificate of origin.
So
It's,
it's
it's almost like a birth certificate. I kind of think of it sometimes.
data sets that are accessed like via APIs, right? Through third
Yes, yeah, we
parties.
have an API to certify it. Also a manual verification if you want to go on our website as well.
Is that proprietary or is that open source
Yeah,
technology?
that's proprietary Bitroots software. Yeah. Mhm.
Very nice.
But I must say the
Fascinating, fascinating stuff, Owen. This is
no.
amazing.
Thank you very much, Mo. Yeah, and I'd love to follow up with you about it as well because uh, we are now rolling out this, and we're looking for miners who want to be onboarded, who are very proud of what they do and want to get access to these premium markets, and similarly to the people who want these coins. Our order book is open, so if you are individual, a fund, a DeFi platform that wants to be powered by sustainable Bitcoin, please come and talk to us, and we'll put you in touch with the, the miners.
Yeah, I love it. Uh, Anything else you'd like to touch on? Um, you know, because we looked at environmental, we looked at social, we looked at governance,
Mhm.
and pretty much, presented real world use cases that some you've been part of and have skin in the game. Uh,
Mhm.
and you know, how important is it for miners? You know, because not all miners are adopting, these values within their operations or these
Mhm.
principles within their business in general. How important is it for miners to uh, certify their Bitcoin and ensure that Bitcoin operates on clean and or renewable slash alternative energy, where carbon's either emitted, prevented, it's either captured, prevented, uh, or mitigated, or. So yeah, how important is it for these miners to do that? I know your answer is
Mhm.
it's very important, and there's an obvious reason why, but I want to look at it more from a community standpoint, and I'd like to know
Mhm.
your perspective, you know, politically about this, because Bitcoin miners are not just Bitcoin miners in my perspective. They're operating a uh, new monetary system or a new monetary network, uh,
Mhm.
new compared to the fiat one that we have. But
Mhm.
and they're contributing to a network that's widely adopted by hundreds of millions of people with over $2 trillion in market cap, and it's no longer a uh, a game played by developers in the basement, right? It's worldwide. It's institutional. It's backed by sovereigns, by governments, by state-backed corporations, all adopting Bitcoin mining as infrastructure for energy monetization and power grid stability and load balancing. Um, in addition to their own FX reasons, right, or foreign currency, all that makes it you know much more important to have uh, proper governance around Bitcoin's ESG compliance. So in within 60 seconds or more, if you want to just give us your perspective on the political importance of Bitcoin miners, mainly, and I want to put them on the spot, the
Yeah.
public miners.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I would say what we're talking really is about responsible mining, I think. So I think we're seeing already a
You're
shift
so
into.
eloquent in simplifying what I'm trying to say. I'm just chaos in my brain, actually, but thank you.
Yeah, no problem. You're very clear to me, so and I'm enjoying the conversation. So I think very soon, or already, we're seeing a shift into uh, a, a right to play for minors is to be responsible within the community you're in place. And there's a great example that's just happened last week. So there were severe winter storms in the US, and as such, there was severe demand on the grid. And a huge portion of miners in the US voluntarily curtailed their operations. I say voluntarily, but it kind of was an obligation and in some cases a contractual requirement for them. And this is because the US is a very developed jurisdiction for this type of thing. And they said, look, yeah, very welcome to set up your operation here, But if there is ever a natural disaster that requires this power, we're going to divert it to domestic and civil use. And that is exactly what's happened. So these miners are acting responsibly and in a way that is expected of them. And if you're this will be the norm, as everything we're talking about is really integrating these mining operations into the local community and working in harmony with it. And but Bitcoin it's very easy to regulate. Mines are, like you say, they're big businesses. They're not small little shops anymore. They're you know, data centers that's easy to identify and pinpoint and to oblige them to act harmoniously. Um, and if you're going to do that, why not shout about it? I think these miners should be very proud of what they're doing. Whether they're using renewables or not, they're still working with the community to provide disaster relief. And yeah, and if you're doing that, let's shout about it. Let's get certified and let everyone be part of that. The kind of final note I would end on is investment. So if you're wanting to attract more investment in your mining operation, this is a great way to do it because you can say, look, we are going to, for example, set up a new Bitcoin mining operation in a poorly served power community in sub-Saharan Africa. And by investing in this Bitcoin mine, you're going to help um, pour money into the local energy supplier and help regulate the grid and bring power to these communities. And there's a company that specializes this called Gridless in sub-Saharan Africa, and they've estimated they've lifted over 28,000 people out of fuel poverty by doing this. So I'd say it's
And pretty
also a way
much,
to attract investment.
yeah, it is definitely an investment attraction program within in itself. And I think
Yeah.
it is also, just don't want to be controversial by saying that, but they didn't just lift people out of fuel and energy poverty, but prevented further energy colonialism. Because, you know, you set up Bitcoin mining on your natural resource
Yeah.
in an indigenous area or in a local community, then you're consuming that resource. You're preventing from further exploitation. No longer are you desperate for external funding or
Absolutely.
external powers to come and exploit your resources off the backs of your people. So I think Bitcoin mining is a real case for preventing energy poverty and really eliminating it in certain countries where they can now build natural wealth again, right? And not have to exploit natural resources to external powers or be desperate for external funding for the purpose of building their local economy, because now there's a way to monetize that natural resource without having to build expensive infrastructures and relying on all that external debt to make it happen. And then you indebt your country for you know tens or hundreds of years to third parties and never
Yeah.
get out of it. And
That's a great point. Yeah.
I'm hoping that one day, you know, uh, large institutions start. There are, but I think not enough on a government scale to fund this infrastructure. This Bitcoin mining infrastructure, not just for the sake of Bitcoin mining, but for the sake of everything we discussed on this episode. Owen, if you have any last words, please go ahead. But I really thank you for being on the show, for supporting us, in this segment, and being part of the growth that we're experiencing right now.
Thank you very much, Mo. It's been a pleasure to talk with you. And yeah, please, if you're interested to learn more, come visit us at bitroots.io. You can message me directly as well. I love to talk about this and hope it was of interest to your audience as well.
Thank you, Owen.